Welcome back to Seasons of Wealth. I'm joined by my co-host, Bobby Hapanowicz. And today we're going to be talking about why many financially successful retirees tend to underspend in retirement. Bobby, why is this so important to talk about?
Well, I think it's an interesting topic because it's all about intentionality. It's about intentionality with your money and how you want your money to impact you, your family, the environment around you. And I mean, just a little bit of a story to get us started too about a relatively new client, friend and client who has been retired for 10 or 15 years before they started working with us. And the first step in their planning, we just ran some basic cash flow projections showing if they continue doing what they're doing, where are they going to be in the future? And it showed, in 20, 25 years or so, towards the end of retirement, they might have about $20 million. They're projected to have about $20 million.
Yeah.
And so the first thought they had, they were surprised, right? They were surprised about the path that they were on. And they're thinking, man, I don't want to leave each of my kids with, this big pile of money with no constraints, control, etc. And so, now that leads into a little deeper, conversation, really what planning is all about. Helping to set up your next generation for success, helping you to make sure that your money is being used in a way that's going to provide you with the most fulfillment that it possibly can. And so that's what planning is all about. And that's the benefit that planning can provide.
Yeah.
And so, many folks, see that glide path and they're very happy with it. That's intentional, right? In that case. But, perhaps there are other cases where many people, might have had other goals or other things that they wanted to pursue that they didn't think were possible. Well, having that plan in place can help them see what the possibilities are and can really help you, live your life with intention.
Yeah. Yeah. And you make a good point. For some people, they might be happy seeing that 20 million number, at the end of their life expectancies and want to leave it at that. And I would argue that our job as an advisor is, even if they're happy with it, it's our job to at least let them know that there's more planning that can come from this. And if they still want to leave it at that, that's fine. They're the boss. But I often find that when that big number, is at the end of that illustration, that's where the next chapter of planning tends to begin. So how often would you say you see this in, financially successful individuals or families? How often is there sort of, that unawareness of, hey, if we don't do some more planning or think about this a little more, there's going to be this, very large number potentially down the road. How often do you come across that?
Yeah, I think it's more common than you expect, or than many people would expect.
Yeah.
Because I mean, think about it. If you're a financially successful individual, it's those principles that cause you to be hesitant about overspending, because that's the number one most common, fear or question that many people have is about outliving their money in retirement. Nobody wants to do that. But if you're that financially successful person who's built the disciplines that built their wealth, it's exactly those same characteristics that might cause one to be hesitant about, really, opening up and spending in the manner that they may think that they're able to.
Yeah.
And so really, I think it's more common than you would think.
Yeah. So many people I have found focus on the financial aspect of it, but there is that whole other aspect of, preparing yourself for that second act of your life, which is the behavioral aspect of it. And I have heard you say this a couple times, the way you've described it is there's ready for retirement and then there's ready
Sure.
for retirement.
Sure. And
So
I think what that gets into is, this the numbers, is the X's and O's, is the quantitative. Can I financially afford to retire? That's pretty that's pretty straightforward, right? That's
Mhm.
pretty easy for us to, see if you can or cannot
Yeah.
afford to retire. But then there's the other part, the qualitative,
Mhm.
that might be a little bit more emotional. Am I ready to make that transition?
Yeah.
Am I ready to, pursue the next chapter? Um, Maybe more as it ties to your wealth. Am I ready to go from the accumulation phase to starting to pull money, from my wealth?
Mhm.
And, what does that look like? What are the possibilities? How do I know that I'm not going to outlive my money? There's a lot that goes into that.
Yeah.
And that there's a lot that goes into that that ties into why many people tend to underspend.
Mhm.
But that's where planning can help.
Mhm.
And, in the case of, the client story that I shared, now, okay, they see that they're on this glide path.
Mhm.
And yes, they were, you know, not wanting for anything. They were living the lifestyle they wanted to, traveling as much as they wanted to. But now they're looking at, hey, what if we brought the kids, for a trip as well, or their families for a trip as
Yeah.
well? What if we were able to provide more support and help during their lifetimes?
Yeah.
There's certain causes that might have been important to them. What if we were able to do more now?
Mhm.
And, in that way, they're able to be more intentional about reaping the benefits and the fulfillment that comes from
Yeah.
using your money with intention. And, I think intention is the key again, because whether you're thinking about it or not thinking about it, there's really only four things you can do with your money. You could spend it, you can give it to people you care about, you can give it to causes you care about, or you could pay taxes with it.
Mhm.
Those are really the four levers. And if you're not intentional, you might be pulling those levers in a way that's different than you would have otherwise wanted to do.
Yeah.
And with a little bit of planning and a little bit of thought ahead of time, you can really maximize the good that you're able to do with
Yeah.
money.
Yeah, I mean, you really hit the nail on the head on why planning is so important. And I know that can sound a little cliche. Planning is a big part of the industry these days, where it wasn't necessarily, let's say, 10 years ago.
Mhm.
But it really does make such a complicated thing much more concrete
Mhm.
for someone contemplating, the financial ability to not just retire, but get the most out of the wealth that they've built and they've accumulated. So, before we talk about, okay, you know, here's what the topic is: underspending in retirement, or the tendency to, and eventually I want to get into, so how can we address that, either ahead of time or in the moment. But I want to back up just a little bit. How much, if this is a fair question to ask, how much of those situations would you say underspending in retirement is just from not being aware that, hey, this is what that trajectory looks like, versus maybe some fear or worry that I don't have enough? No matter how big their current net worth is, sometimes there is maybe that fear still of, what if there's not enough for the rest of my life? So what ratio, if that's a fair question,
Yeah.
Tasha, or maybe it's a little bit of both in every case.
And I really think it is. I think
Mhm.
both. We see both quite a bit. And when we talk about, giving yourself permission to, you know, spend a little bit more, or start to use your wealth sooner or in a different fashion than you are now, that's starting from, a bedrock of really conservatively built financial plan with conservative assumptions, both for expenses, both for needs today and in the future, conservative growth projections on investments, and looking at multiple different scenarios, not just plan A, but what if plan B, C, D, or E happens as well, and making sure that those, are very much satisfactory answers. That's where we are coming from
Mhm. Mhm.
when we talk about that now. And so in that way, we hope to, sort of alleviate some of that fear that can come from overspending.
Mhm.
And we can look at, planning for the future in a couple of different ways too. So I mean, everybody has their, fixed or core, needs, and we have our discretionary wants.
Mhm.
And that could really be a good exercise for everybody, really drafting their goals today and for the future into wants and needs.
Mhm.
And the needs absolutely have to be taken care of no matter what, right? But
Yeah.
wants can be pursued in a little bit more different fashion.
Mhm.
And that's a helpful way to, re-bracket or re-segment, where where your priorities are. And it can also help with, planning for the future, making sure, hey, we have plenty there no matter what for needs.
Yeah.
And also make sure that we're, accounting for your wants and accounting for, helping you live, to the fullest
Yeah.
in retirement.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I what you're describing is, a dynamic strategy, right? And that's the thing is, life changes, the economy goes through phases and cycles, the markets go through phases and cycles. And so to be able to bring a dynamic plan to that withdrawal strategy throughout your retirement, I think to your point does add that level of comfort ahead of time before you even actually get into retirement. Because if you know as an individual that, hey, my plan is not just accounting for the the things that I know I'm going to need, but also the things that maybe are not as known, more variable, even though not every question is answered, in year one of retirement for the rest of my lifetime, we're still putting a plan in place to address those unknowns when they come up,
Right.
and to be dynamic over time. So yes, I think that's a really good thing to bring up. Is there anything else that you would suggest someone sitting here, watching or listening? What else should they be doing, um, to make sure that if there is that trajectory over time, but they're addressing it in the way that they want.
hmm Yeah, and again, if you're seeing that trajectory and that's exactly what you want, then you are living your retirement
Right, right.
intention.
Mhm.
To the extent that you're surprised by those results or um, um surprised in any way, then perhaps there isn't that intentionality.
Yeah,
And so I think that's the first step is just getting a sense for what your foundation looks like. And like you
mhm,
said, any good plan has room for flexibility built
yeah.
into it, room to pivot built into it.
Mhm.
Um, and so, thinking about your near term and long term wants and needs, planning for that and giving yourself a little bit of room to pivot
Yeah.
along the way, I think is really important.
And I would argue that, at least initially and every so often, it would make sense to get your estate attorney involved, because a lot of this has to do with legacy.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's not just about the amount, but how you leave that amount.
Taxes today, taxes in the future, investment strategy, cash flow strategy, that it all is incorporated. It's all,
Yeah.
intertwined. And when you're making any of these decisions, all of your professionals should be
Yeah.
involved to, make sure everybody's on the same page and your wealth is being, managed and used in a way that maximizes
Yep.
what's possible.
Absolutely. So, something I saw a lot, and you alluded to this at the beginning of our conversation, or you touched upon it briefly, but um, what I have seen many times is while someone who is financially successful, they are still working and they have, this portfolio that we're managing for them, and their appetite for risk is here. And then they step into retirement. They step into that second act of their life. And nothing else has changed besides the fact that they are now retired and depending on that portfolio. They no longer have those income streams or that income stream that they have been used to for so many years of their life. And now automatically their appetite for risk has gone from here down to here without anything else changing. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that's very understandable. Yes, it's normal. Um, but I wanted to bring that up because I guess my next question for you, Bobby, is how would or should someone go about getting mentally prepared for, that? Is it simply just talking about it, with your advisor? Um, you know, what do we do as advisors? What should your advisor be doing? If that's okay to hear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that starts, years leading up to retirement. And in our experience, that's for many people not a flip of the switch, right? I went from very, aggressive risk tolerance to very conservative risk tolerance. It's usually a gradual process.
Yeah.
When you're 30 years old, you might be thinking about money a little differently than when you're 45 with a family than you are when you're 60 leading up to retirement. And that's a gradual process along the way. And so, as the plan changes, as your needs for that money or perhaps time horizon to using that money change, it's natural for risk tolerance to change too. And the investment game plan should change along the way with that. We don't want to be breaching your sleep well at night times. We say that quite a bit as well, and it all sort of works together. Yeah, it all sort of works together.
Okay. So for someone, listening or watching today, if there is one thing that you would want them to do, the one takeaway from this conversation, what would that be?
In a word, it's intention. Plan with intention. Be in tune with where you are today, where you want to go in the future, what your goals, your priorities are for yourself, for your family, how you want your wealth to affect those around you, the community around you, and have intention around how you're using that wealth. Right. Every component of the plan should have a why behind it, or clearly really clear, really easy to articulate why behind it. And if that's not there, then there's probably room for opportunity.
Love it. Good stuff. Thanks for sitting down with me today.
Thank you. Enjoy.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you in the next episode.